Welcome to Heartbreaker, your love radio.
That Friday night, the nightclub was pulsing with pure energy. Located in the heart of New York City, the place was dominated by loud electronic music and flashing neon lights that gave the atmosphere an almost magical touch. The club was packed, with people dancing and having fun, immersed in the excitement. Jack entered the nightclub and was immediately engulfed by the contagious energy. He made his way to the bar, observing the scene around him. That's when he saw her. Leaning against the counter, absent-mindedly stirring her cocktail, was a woman who immediately captured his attention. Daisy was stunning, with dark hair cascading over her shoulders and piercing eyes reflecting the club's lights. Jack felt an immediate and irresistible attraction. Taking a deep breath, he gathered his courage and approached her. "Hi, can I buy you a drink?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Daisy looked up and smiled slightly. "Sure, a martini, please." While the bartender prepared the drink, Jack tried to start a conversation. "Do you come here often?" "Once in a while," Daisy replied. "It's a good place to forget your problems." Jack noticed a note of sadness in her voice. "Sounds like you've had a tough week." "Something like that," she admitted. "I just got out of a long relationship and wanted to take my mind off things." Jack felt empathy for her. "I understand. Sometimes going out and having fun is the best way to deal with these things. I'm Jack, by the way." "Daisy," she replied, accepting the martini from the bartender. "And you, Jack, what brings you here tonight?" "I like going out to dance and distract people," Jack said, smiling. Daisy laughed, and the sound was like music to Jack's ears. They continued talking, and the chemistry between them grew with every word. Jack shared about his work as a graphic designer and his passion for music. Daisy talked about her projects as a photographer and her travels around the world. There was an undeniable connection between them, a blend of curiosity and attraction that was palpable. "Want to get out of here?" Jack suggested after a while. "We can find a quieter place to talk." Daisy hesitated for a moment, then smiled and nodded. "Let's go." They left the club and walked through the illuminated streets of New York, talking and laughing. They ended up finding a nearby hotel and decided to spend the night together. The attraction between them was too strong to ignore. In the hotel room, passion took over, and they gave themselves to each other with an intensity they hadn't experienced in a long time. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, illuminating the satisfied faces of Jack and Daisy. They exchanged contacts, promising to meet again. "It was an incredible night," Jack said as he said goodbye to Daisy at the hotel door. "It really was," she agreed, smiling. "See you, Jack." As Jack watched Daisy walk away, he knew something special had begun. Jack's apartment was a reflection of his personality. Modern, organized, and with an impressive view of the city. That Saturday night, a few weeks after their initial meeting, he and Daisy were on the couch, laughing and talking as if they were old friends. The connection between them had intensified quickly, and they spent almost all their free time together. Jack was captivated by Daisy's vivacity. She had an adventurous spirit and a zest for life that immensely attracted him. That night, they had cooked together, turning the kitchen into a space filled with laughter. Dinner was followed by a movie marathon, with conversations and kisses in between scenes. While watching the last movie, Jack noticed that Daisy was quieter than usual. She seemed distant, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. Concerned, he asked, "Is everything okay, Daisy?" She hesitated before answering, looking at the city lights on the horizon. "It's just... I'm thinking about some things." Jack turned to her, holding her hand. "You can tell me what's bothering you." Daisy sighed deeply, searching for the right words. "Jack, I like you a lot. But I think things are moving too fast. I feel like I haven't had enough time to recover from my last relationship." The sincerity in Daisy's voice hit Jack deeply. He knew the intensity between them was strong, but he hadn't realized how much it might be pressuring her. "Did I do something you didn't like?" he asked softly. She looked at him, her eyes shining with emotion. "You're amazing, Jack. You really are. But I think I need some time for myself." Those words pierced Jack's heart. He had fallen for Daisy quickly, and the thought of losing her was devastating. But he knew he had to respect her feelings. "I want you to be okay," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "If you need time, I understand." Daisy squeezed his hand, her eyes filling with tears. "Thank you for understanding. This isn't a permanent goodbye. Maybe, after I sort things out, we can meet again." Jack nodded, trying to contain the pain he felt. "I'll be here, Daisy. I'll always be here." That night, as Daisy packed her things, sadness hung in the air. They said goodbye with a long hug, both reluctant to part. When the door closed behind her, Jack felt an emptiness open up in his chest. The following days were tough for Jack. He tried to focus on work and his daily activities, but Daisy's absence was palpable. Every corner of the apartment reminded him of the moments they had shared, and the loneliness felt crushing. Meanwhile, he dedicated himself to self-improvement, hoping that when and if the day came, he would be ready to restart with Daisy in a healthy and happy way. Until then, Jack kept the memories of their time together, using them as a reminder of what true love could be, even if only for a brief period. It was a cold winter night in New York, and the icy wind cut through the streets, making people huddle in their coats as they hurried along. Jack, with his hands in his pockets and a scarf wrapped around his neck, walked toward a cozy and intimate bar that his friends had recommended. Nearly a year had passed since he and Daisy had separated. Upon entering the bar, he was greeted by a welcoming warmth and a relaxing atmosphere. The soft lighting and background jazz music created a perfect setting for a quiet evening. Jack looked around, searching for an available table, when his eyes caught a familiar sight. Daisy was there, sitting at a table with a man he didn't recognize. She was laughing at something the man had said, and the sight brought a flood of memories and emotions. Jack hesitated for a moment, considering whether or not he should approach. The memory of the breakup's pain was still fresh, but the curiosity and desire to see her again were stronger. Taking a deep breath, he walked towards the table. "Hi, Daisy," he said, trying to keep his voice casual. Daisy looked up, evident surprise on her face. "Jack. What a surprise to see you here," she smiled, and the warmth in her smile was undeniable. "This is Pedro," she introduced the man next to her. "Pedro, this is Jack, a friend I told you about." Pedro extended his hand to Jack. "Nice to meet you, Jack." Jack shook Pedro's hand, feeling a mix of emotions. "Nice to meet you, Pedro." "Would you like to join us?" Daisy asked, smiling. "Can I?" he replied, feeling a bit awkward. "Of course," Daisy said, pulling up a chair for him. The conversation started off light and relaxed. They talked about their careers, hobbies, and life in the city. Pedro was charismatic and had a sense of humor that made everyone laugh. Jack began to relax, enjoying the company. As the night went on, the conversation turned more personal. Jack shared some of the things he had learned about himself over the past year, and Daisy talked about her travels and photography projects. Pedro, in turn, revealed that he was a freelance writer, passionate about love stories and mysteries. During one of these deeper conversations, Daisy casually mentioned something that caught Jack by surprise. "Pedro and I are in an open relationship," she said as she gently swirled her drink in her hand. Jack was momentarily speechless. "An open relationship?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Daisy nodded. "Yes, we decided it's what's best for us. We can explore other connections and still keep our relationship strong." Pedro smiled and added, "It works well for us." It gives a sense of freedom and mutual trust. Jack tried to process the information, feeling intrigued and confused. The idea of an open relationship was new to him, especially considering his past feelings for Daisy. The night continued, and the conversation eventually returned to lighter topics. When it was time to say goodbye, Jack felt strange but also curious about this new dynamic in Daisy's life. "It was good to see you, Daisy," he said as they stood up. "It was great to see you too, Jack," she replied, hugging him warmly. "Don't lose touch." Pedro shook Jack's hand again. "I hope we can meet again, Jack." Jack smiled, though his mind was still full of questions. As he walked out of the bar, the cold night air hit him again, but his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Daisy still held a special place in his heart. Jack's apartment was bathed in the soft light of a Sunday afternoon. Decorated minimally, the space reflected his personality: simple, organized, and functional. A week had passed since the reunion at the bar, and he was still trying to process the dynamic between Daisy and Pedro. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. Jack opened the door and found Daisy on the other side, smiling. "Hi, Jack," she said, stepping into the apartment. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Of course not," Jack replied, closing the door behind her. "It's good to see you, Daisy. Would you like something to drink?" "Water would be great, thanks." They settled on the couch, and Jack handed Daisy a glass of water. "So, how have you been? It was nice seeing you at the bar last week." Daisy nodded, looking around the apartment. "It really was good. Pedro and I enjoyed your company. And you? How have you been?" "I'm fine," Jack said, though his mind was still full of questions. "I've been thinking a lot about you too." Daisy smiled, but there was tension in her eyes. "I can imagine. It's not exactly a common situation." Jack took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Daisy, I need to be honest. When you mentioned the open relationship, it caught me by surprise. It's not something I expected to hear." Daisy placed the glass of water on the coffee table and turned to face him. "I understand, Jack. And that's why I'm here today. I wanted to talk about it in more detail." Jack leaned forward, attentive.
"I'm listening.
Daisy began to speak, her voice calm and steady. "Pedro and I have an open relationship because we believe it allows us to explore different connections and grow as individuals and as a couple. We both feel more free and, at the same time, more connected." She paused, watching Jack's reaction. "When we met again, I realized I still feel something for you. And Pedro knows that. So we talked and thought, and we would like to invite you to be part of this dynamic. No demands for exclusivity, just a genuine connection between the three of us." Jack was silent, processing what he had just heard. "You're suggesting that I enter a relationship with you and Pedro?" "Yes," Daisy replied softly. "I know it's a bold proposal and that it can be hard to understand. But I believe it could work, as long as we're all willing to try." Jack felt a mix of emotions. Part of him was intrigued and curious, but another part was shocked and unsure. "Daisy, this is a lot to digest. I don't know what to say." Daisy moved closer, placing her hand on his. "I don't expect you to decide now. I want you to think about it. I know it's not easy, but I believe you deserve to know all the options." Jack looked at Daisy's hand on his, feeling the familiarity and comfort of her touch. "I need time to think. This is something completely new to me." She nodded, understanding. "Of course, Jack. Take all the time you need. I just wanted to be honest about how I feel and what Pedro and I are willing to explore." The afternoon progressed, and their conversation shifted to lighter topics. Jack showed Daisy some of his new graphic design creations, and she shared her recent photographs. There was an air of normalcy, but both knew that a significant decision lingered in the air. When Daisy stood to leave, Jack walked her to the door. "Thanks for listening, Jack. And please, think carefully about what we discussed." Jack nodded, trying to smile. "I will. Thank you, Daisy." They said their goodbyes with a tight hug, and Jack closed the door, feeling more confused than ever. He walked to the window, looking out at the city below, lost in thought. Daisy's proposal was bold and challenged everything he knew about relationships. The idea of being close to Daisy was tempting, but the complexity of the situation made him uncertain. It was a clear spring morning in Central Park, and the trees were filled with colorful flowers, creating an atmosphere of renewal and hope. Jack walked slowly along the well-kept paths, watching the people around him, families strolling, joggers and cyclists enjoying the sunny day. However, his mind was far from all that tranquility. It had been a week since Daisy had made the unexpected proposal of an open relationship with her and Pedro, and Jack was still struggling to understand his feelings. As he walked, he mentally reviewed the pros and cons. On the one hand, the idea of being close to Daisy again was extremely attractive. There was a genuine connection between them, something he hadn't found anywhere else. But, on the other hand, the dynamics of an open relationship were completely new to him. Jack had always valued the exclusivity and intimacy that came with a traditional relationship. He feared that including Pedro would complicate things and cause more pain than satisfaction. Lost in thought, Jack found an empty bench in the shade of a large tree and sat down. He looked out at the horizon, watching children playing and couples strolling hand in hand, trying to find clarity amidst his confusion. "Jack!" The familiar voice snapped him out of his thoughts. He looked up and saw Tom, an old college friend, approaching. "Long time no see, man. Mind if I join you?" "Sure, Tom," Jack replied, smiling. "Have a seat." Tom sat down next to him, adjusting his sunglasses. "You look lost in thought. Is something bothering you?" Jack sighed, grateful for the opportunity to vent. "Actually, yes. It's a complicated situation." Tom leaned forward, interested. "You can count on me. What's going on?" Jack explained everything: the reunion with Daisy, her relationship with Pedro, and the proposal for an open relationship. Tom listened attentively, not interrupting, allowing Jack to express all his feelings. "Wow," Tom said when Jack finished. "That's really something to think about." "Yeah," Jack agreed. "I really like Daisy, but this open relationship thing, I don't know if it's for me." Tom nodded, pondering. "You know, Jack, there's no easy answer to this." Jack looked at Tom, seeking some clarity. "What if what I want is to be with Daisy?" Tom smiled. "Then you need to talk to her and Pedro. Set clear boundaries and see if everyone is on the same page. It might be tough at first, but if everyone is committed, it could work." Jack nodded, feeling a bit more at ease. "You're right. I need to be honest about my feelings and talk to them." They continued talking for a while, sharing stories and laughing about college memories. Tom's presence brought a sense of normalcy and comfort to Jack, something he desperately needed. After a while, Tom stood up, ready to continue his walk. "It was good to see you, Jack." Jack laughed and stood up, hugging his friend. "It was good to see you too, Tom." As he finished his walk, Jack took out his phone and typed a message to Daisy. "Hey, Daisy. Can we meet up this week? I need to talk to you about that topic." He sent the message and put his phone away, feeling a mix of anxiety and relief. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon in Brooklyn, and a cozy cafe on the corner of a busy street provided the perfect setting for the important conversation that was about to happen. Jack arrived at the place a little before the scheduled time, nervous but determined. He chose a table in the corner, away from the noise of conversations and coffee machines, and waited. Shortly after, he saw Daisy and Pedro walk in through the door, both smiling warmly when they saw him. "Hi, Jack," said Daisy as she approached and hugged him.
E.D.
"Hi, Pedro," replied Jack, shaking Pedro's hand afterward. They sat down and ordered coffee. The atmosphere was calm, with soft background music and the aroma of roasted beans filling the air. Jack took a deep breath, preparing for the conversation ahead. "So," began Pedro, looking at Jack with an encouraging smile. "Daisy told us you wanted to discuss some things." "Yes," said Jack, trying to keep his voice steady. "I've thought a lot about Daisy's proposal, and I think I'm willing to give it a try, but we need to set some clear rules so everyone feels comfortable." Daisy nodded, looking relieved. "Of course, Jack. We're here to listen to your concerns and find a middle ground that works for all of us." Jack took a sip of his coffee before continuing. "First of all, I think it's important to establish that this relationship should be just between the three of us. I'm not comfortable with the idea of other people being involved." Pedro was the first to respond, nodding in agreement. "That's totally fair, Jack. We also believe that limiting the relationship to the three of us will be healthier and less complicated." "I agree," said Daisy, with a reassuring smile. "I want everyone to feel safe and valued in this dynamic." Jack felt relieved to see that his first condition was well received. "Great. I also think we need to have open and honest communication. If at any point someone feels uncomfortable or has doubts, we need to talk about it immediately." "I completely agree," said Pedro. "Communication is key for this to work. We need to be transparent and respect each other's feelings." Daisy added, "And I also think it's important for us to have quality time together, but also individually. Each of us should have the chance to build and strengthen our connections in a balanced way." Jack nodded, seeing the logic in Daisy's proposal. "Yes, that makes sense. I also would like to set some boundaries in terms of public intimacy. I think it's important to respect everyone's space and comfort, especially in places where others might not understand our dynamic." Pedro smiled, appreciating Jack's consideration. "Those are very good points, Jack. I think we're all on the same page regarding this." The conversation continued, with each person sharing their expectations and concerns. They talked about how to handle jealousy, how to manage their time together, and how to support each other during difficult times. There were serious moments, but also plenty of laughter as they explored the complexity and possibilities of their new relationship. "So, are we all in agreement?" Daisy asked, looking from Jack to Pedro. "Yes," said Jack, feeling more confident. "I think we have a solid foundation to start from. I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to try." Pedro reached across the table, first holding Daisy's hand and then Jack's. "We're all in this together. Let's make it work." Jack squeezed Pedro's hand, feeling a mix of emotion and determination. Daisy smiled at both of them, looking radiant. They committed to keeping open communication and supporting each other, no matter what happened. As they left the cafe, Jack felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The decision had been made, and they had a plan. They walked together through the streets of Brooklyn, talking and laughing, beginning to discover what this new phase of their lives would be like. That night, as he lay in bed, Jack reflected on the conversation. He was entering uncharted territory, but with Daisy by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Pedro's apartment was spacious and modern, with large windows offering an impressive view of the illuminated city. It was a Friday night, and Jack, Daisy, and Pedro were gathered in the living room, enjoying a home-cooked meal prepared by Pedro. The atmosphere was relaxed, but Jack couldn't shake the growing sense of discomfort that had been with him for the past few weeks. As Daisy and Pedro laughed at an inside joke, Jack found himself lost in thought. Since agreeing to the new dynamic, He had been trying to adapt, but lately, Pedro's presence was starting to bother him more than he cared to admit. Initially, everything seemed to work well, but now, Jack felt an increasing need for exclusivity with Daisy, something that went against the terms they had established. "Jack, are you okay?" Daisy asked, noticing the distant look on his face. Jack blinked, turning his attention to her.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Just thinking about a few things. Pedro smiled, pouring more wine for everyone. "Are you sure? You seem a bit out of it tonight." Jack took a deep breath, knowing it was time to be honest. "Actually, there's something I'd like to discuss with you both." The room fell silent, and Jack felt all eyes on him. "I've been thinking a lot about our dynamic, and to be honest, I'm starting to feel uncomfortable with it." Daisy frowned, concerned. "What exactly is bothering you, Jack?" Jack hesitated, carefully choosing his words. "I think I want something more exclusive. I'm not saying our relationship isn't special, but I'm struggling with the idea of sharing it." Pedro set his wine glass on the table, his expression serious. "I understand. This is something important to discuss." Daisy looked at Jack, her eyes full of understanding and concern. "Jack, we knew this could be a challenge. I'm here to listen and understand what you're feeling." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. "I care a lot about you, Daisy. And I like you too, Pedro. But lately, I've been feeling like I can't handle this. I want more time alone with Daisy. I want an exclusive connection." Pedro sighed, understanding the situation. "I understand, Jack. This isn't easy for any of us." Daisy placed her hand on Jack's, trying to comfort him. "I know it's difficult, Jack." The tension in the room was palpable. Jack knew this conversation could change everything, and he was prepared to face the consequences. "Maybe we could spend more time together, just the two of us," he suggested, looking directly at Daisy. Pedro nodded, understanding Jack's need. "That makes sense. We can adjust our routines so you and Daisy have more time together." Daisy agreed, but there was a note of sadness in her voice. "Of course, Jack. We can do that. But we need to make sure everyone feels valued and respected." The night continued on a more serious note. They talked about how they could adjust the dynamic to accommodate Jack's feelings, but the tension didn't completely disappear. Jack knew the temporary solution might not be enough in the long run. As the night came to an end, Jack stood up to leave. Daisy walked him to the door, holding his hand. "Thank you for being honest, Jack. We'll work through this together, okay?" Jack nodded, feeling somewhat relieved but still uneasy. "Of course, Daisy. I'll do my best to make this work." They said goodbye with a tight hug, and Jack left the apartment, walking through the city's illuminated streets. He desperately wanted everything to work out, but doubts and fears persisted. He knew he needed to have a deeper conversation with Daisy, away from Pedro, to finally address his anxieties. Jack finally made a decision. The next morning, he would speak with Daisy and clearly and honestly express his feelings. It was time to face the truth and find out if their love could really survive the challenging circumstances. The rain was hitting hard against the windows of Jack's apartment, creating a constant melody that reflected the whirlwind of emotions inside him. Days had passed since the night at Pedro's apartment, and the tension had only increased. Jack knew he needed to have a definitive conversation with Daisy, and that rainy night seemed like the perfect moment to resolve everything. Jack was sitting on the couch, staring intently at his phone. He had sent a message to Daisy, asking her to come to his apartment to talk. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the quiet space, and Jack stood up, feeling his heart beat faster. Daisy entered, drenched from the rain but with a gentle smile. "Hi, Jack," she said, trying to ease the tension. "Sorry for the delay. The traffic was terrible because of the rain." No problem, Jack replied, grabbing a towel and handing it to her. Thanks for coming. They sat on the couch, and Jack took a deep breath before starting. Daisy, I need to be honest with you. I've thought a lot about our situation, and I can't handle it. The idea of sharing you with Pedro is hurting me more than I imagined. Daisy looked at him with sadness in her eyes. I knew this would be difficult, Jack. And I'm so sorry that you're suffering. But you knew from the beginning that this was the dynamic Pedro and I had. I know, Jack said, his voice firm but full of emotion. I thought I could handle it, but I can't. I want you just for myself, Daisy. I can't continue like this. Before Daisy could respond, the door opened, and Pedro walked in, shaking off his wet umbrella. Sorry to interrupt, he said, noticing the tension in the air. I thought it would be good for all of us to be together for this conversation. Jack felt anger rise, but controlled himself. Pedro, I was just explaining to Daisy that I can't continue with this three-way relationship. I need exclusivity. Pedro sighed, looking weary. I understand, Jack. But Daisy and I chose this path because we believe it works for us. If you can't accept that, maybe we should reconsider everything. Daisy looked from one to the other, tears starting to fill her eyes. Please, don't fight. We can find a solution. I don't want to lose either of you. Jack stood up, unable to contain his frustration. Daisy, I love you, but I can't go on like this. And Pedro, I respect you, but this isn't working. Pedro also stood up, the tension in the air almost palpable. So, what are you suggesting, Jack? That Daisy choose between us. Jack shook his head, feeling defeated. I don't want to force Daisy to choose. I just know that, for me, this isn't healthy. I need something simpler, more traditional. The discussion intensified, with raised voices and emotions running high. Jack and Pedro exchanged accusations, revealing the fragility of their three-way relationship. Daisy tried to intervene, but the situation had already reached a critical point. Finally, Jack took a deep breath, feeling a painful clarity. I can't do this. I don't want to continue. Daisy, I'm leaving this relationship. The words fell like a final sentence, and the silence that followed was heavy. Daisy remained silent, while Pedro seemed resigned. I'm so sorry, Daisy, Jack said, approaching her. I love you, but I can't go on like this. I hope you find happiness, whatever path you choose. Daisy hugged him, her tears mixing with the rain still dripping from her hair. I love you too, Jack. And I understand. I'm sorry for everything. Jack pulled away from the embrace, feeling a heavy heart but certain of his decision. He looked at Pedro, who simply nodded in silence, accepting Jack's decision. As Daisy and Pedro left the apartment, Jack closed the door and leaned against it, feeling loneliness take over. Jack knew the decision had been difficult. He needed to move on and find a path that was true to himself. That night, alone in his apartment, Jack reflected on the lessons learned. Love was complex and didn't always follow the expected path, but he knew that by following his heart, he was taking an important step towards finding the peace and happiness he so deeply desired.